Hi, my name's Rowan, and the day my grandfather died, my brother walked into my office, threw papers across my desk, and said, "Sign away your $5 million. You're not real family." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "All right, tomorrow morning." What he didn't know was that tomorrow had been coming for years. They'd lied to me since I was a boy, smiled while cutting me out, told me I didn't belong, that I was lucky just to be included, but luck runs out. And when he saw what I revealed the next morning, his face turned white and everything he built started to fall. What would you do if your own blood tried to erase you? It was barely past 8 when I got to the office. Austin mornings had that quiet hum before the city woke up, the kind that let you hear the faint whir of the ceiling fan and the first hiss from the coffee pot. I liked those moments, the stillness before the phones started ringing, before Grant showed up with his whirlwind energy. The air smelled of oak polish and old paper. Mabel, my secretary of 20 years, had already left a fresh cup of black coffee on my desk, the way she always did. She didn't say much these days, but she didn't have to. We both understood silence better than noise. I was reviewing the final draft of a downtown redevelopment plan when the door burst open. The handle hit the wall hard enough to leave a mark. Grant stood there, face flushed, his suit jacket hanging half off one shoulder. He didn't even greet me, just stormed across the room and slammed a manila folder onto my desk. "Sign it," he said. The papers slid a little across the wood, stopping just short of my coffee cup. I looked at the folder, then at him. "Good morning to you too." "Don't start," he snapped. "Just sign them, Rowan." Mabel froze near the door, her hand still on a stack of mail she'd been sorting. I could tell she wanted to slip out, but she stayed. Maybe out of loyalty, maybe because she'd seen enough of these scenes to know leaving wouldn't help. "What's this about?" I asked, keeping my tone even. He leaned both hands on my desk, close enough that I could smell the cologne our grandfather used to wear. "It's about you stepping aside, the inheritance, the firm, the Hale accounts, all of it." I flipped open the folder. Legal documents, transfer of rights, disclaimers, waiver of claim. Every line was already notarized except the signature space with my name typed neatly under it. "Grant, this isn't your style," I said quietly. "Usually, you let the lawyers handle the bullying." His jaw tightened. "Don't push me. You're not real blood, Rowan. You know it. Everyone knows it. You were adopted out of pity, not love. Granddad left things for family." That word, family, hit harder than the slam of the door had. It always did. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but I stayed seated. Years of practice taught me that silence unsettles men like Grant more than shouting ever could. "Is this really how you want to do this?" I asked. He scoffed, straightened up, and walked around the office like he owned the place. "I've already filed for distribution. The board agrees. You signing this just makes it cleaner, saves us all time." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mabel lower her gaze. She'd seen me humiliated before, but never quite like this. Grant turned back toward me. "Don't make this messy. You always said you didn't care about the money." "That's true," I said. "But what bothers me is watching someone turn greed into a family tradition." His mouth twitched into that half smile I'd learned to read years ago, part victory, part contempt. "You think you can guilt me with your moral crap? Sign the papers, Rowan." I didn't reach for the pen. My right hand stayed on the desk, my thumb brushing the corner of a linen handkerchief embroidered with the letter R. Winston gave it to me when I got my first promotion, told me it was for keeping my hands clean, even when business got dirty. I lifted my eyes to meet Grant's. "All right," I said. "Tomorrow morning." He blinked. "What?" I said tomorrow morning. "You'll have your answer then." Grant's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Knew you'd fold, always do." He grabbed his folder, stuffed it under his arm, and walked out, muttering something about paper blood under his breath. The door closed behind him with a dull click that seemed to echo longer than it should have. For a few seconds, no one moved. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. Mabel finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you want me to call Mr. Sloane?" I shook my head. "Not yet." She hesitated, nodded once, and quietly left, closing the door behind her. I sat there for a long while, staring at the empty doorway. The sunlight caught the edge of the handkerchief on my desk, making the white thread gleam like it was waiting for something. I took a slow breath and felt the heat behind my ribs settle into something colder, sharper. It wasn't fear. It was calculation. He thought I'd fold. He always did. That was the game we played my entire life. Him barking orders, me pretending to yield. It kept the peace. It kept me invisible. But invisibility has its uses. It lets you see what others miss. I reached for my phone, opened the last message from Arthur Sloane, Granddad's executor, and stared at the subject line I hadn't touched since the funeral. "For your eyes only." I didn't open it yet. Tomorrow morning would come soon enough. After Grant stormed out of my office, I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, watching the shadows shift across the hardwood floor as the morning passed into early afternoon. By evening, I'd changed into a charcoal suit and driven out to the estate, Winston's place, once mine in spirit, if not in name. The long driveway still crunched the same under my tires. Spanish moss hung heavier than I remembered, like even the trees were mourning. Lights glowed softly from the windows, golden and polite. There were already cars lined up, mostly German sedans and black Escalades, all angled like they were too good for gravel. The valet barely acknowledged me. I handed him the keys without a word and walked up the steps, the hum of string instruments drifting out before I opened the door. Inside, everything was candlelight and crystal. Winston would have hated it. He was a man of bourbon and soft jazz, not imported cheese and Mozart quartets. But this wasn't about honoring him. It was about showcasing Grant's version of the legacy. As I stepped into the main room, I felt it instantly. The hush that falls when someone enters who wasn't supposed to be there. "He's here," someone whispered, just loud enough. A woman near the fireplace clutched her pearls like I'd brought a scandal in with me. The pianist paused, just for a breath. I nodded politely and moved toward the back of the room, past portraits of Winston, freshly framed and staged like they'd been chosen from a catalog. Winston with Grant at his college graduation. Winston shaking hands with oil partners. None of them included me. Not even the one from the firm's anniversary dinner where I gave the toast. The slideshow began. I stood behind the crowd, hands clasped loosely in front of me. Grant stood center stage in front of the projector, soaking in every flash. Photos played one after another. Winston with Grant at fishing trips, Winston at construction sites, Winston at his lake house. I watched, waiting for even one picture with me in it. Nothing. Then came one of Winston's old office, the one I helped design. I remembered the framed blueprint I'd drawn hanging above his desk. In the photo, it was gone, replaced by a picture of Grant holding a stock certificate. Subtle, clean, brutal. I scanned the crowd. Evelyn stood to the side, wearing a navy dress with her hair pinned up, looking older than she had even at Winston's funeral. She caught my eye for a moment, offered the faintest apologetic smile, then looked away. Her silence stung more than Grant's edits. She had helped raise us both. When Winston adopted me, it was Evelyn who taught me how to tie a tie, who read me bedtime stories when he worked late. I used to think she was the glue. Now she was just another quiet participant. The slideshow ended. Grant stepped forward, glass in hand. "My grandfather," he began, "was a man of vision, of loyalty, of blood." He let that word hang there, a beat too long. Everything I've achieved, I owe to his name, his guidance, and his belief in me. I felt a dozen pairs of eyes drift toward me, then just as quickly away. He kept talking about legacy, about leadership, about Hale blood. I tuned him out. Not out of spite, but because I knew none of it was for me. This wasn't a memorial. It was theater. At the reception, I found my name card at a table in the far corner, next to the restrooms. Mabel sat across from me, offering a warm but tired smile. "I told them you wouldn't be comfortable up front," she said softly. I appreciated the lie. Two men behind us spoke just loud enough for their words to find my ears. "He's the adopted one, right?" "Yeah, doesn't really count. Not in Texas law anyway." My stomach tightened, but I didn't turn around. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and let my fingers wrap around the linen handkerchief. Winston's voice echoed in my memory. "A man's worth isn't written in his blood, but in how he carries silence." I stayed seated, said nothing, ate nothing, watched everything. The smirks, the shifting alliances, the glances exchanged when my name was mentioned. Grant was working the room like a politician. Every handshake was a pitch, every toast a transaction, but I was watching him too. Watching how he ignored Evelyn when she tried to speak, how he leaned too close to the woman from Hale Legal, how he avoided Arthur Sloane, who stood near the exit sipping ginger ale. This wasn't grief. It was grooming. I stood up quietly and slipped away. No one noticed. Through a side hallway, I made my way toward Winston's old study. The lights were off. The door was locked, but I had the key. He gave it to me 3 weeks before he died, pressed it into my hand in the hospital without a word. Inside, the room was untouched, wood-paneled walls, the scent of tobacco that still lingered in the fabric of his reading chair. I flicked on the desk lamp and saw the corner of a sealed envelope sticking out from under a stack of old invoices. My name was written on it, in Winston's hand. The house was almost dark by the time I slipped back into the hallway. The last of the guests had gone, leaving only the faint scent of perfume and melted candle wax in the air. Distantly, I could hear someone stacking plates in the kitchen. Probably one of the staff cleaning up after Grant's little production. I moved carefully through the hall, the wooden floor creaking beneath my shoes like it remembered me. The portraits on the walls watched silently. Winston in his younger days, sharp-eyed, confident. I wondered what he would think of tonight's performance. When I reached the door to his study, I paused. My reflection looked back at me in the brass handle, tired eyes, a face that no longer flinched. I slipped the old key from my pocket and turned it slowly. The click echoed in the quiet, like the start of something I couldn't undo. Inside, the room was dim, just the faint glow of the lamp on the corner table. The air was thick with the scent of aged leather and tobacco, like Winston had only stepped out for a minute. His desk sat where it always had, neatly arranged. Everything seemed untouched. But dust tells the truth no one else does, and I noticed a clean outline where something had been recently moved. I pulled the chair back and sat down, running my hand over the desk surface. My fingers caught on a groove near the edge, slight, deliberate. I pressed it, and the bottom drawer shifted open a fraction. A hidden latch clicked. Inside the small compartment was a leather-bound notebook, worn at the corners, with WH embossed in faded gold. My throat tightened. I opened it carefully. The first page was blank except for a single line written in Winston's bold handwriting. To Rowan, who carries my name, in silence. For a long moment, I just stared at those words. The ink had faded a little, but the intent hadn't. My hand trembled when I turned the page. The entries began years ago. Short notes at first, like diary fragments. April 17th. He's learning faster than I expected. Quiet, but steady. Reminds me of myself before money got loud. May 3rd. Grant sees competition where there isn't any. That's on me. I raised him to believe he had to win every room he walked into. I felt my chest tighten. The handwriting grew shakier in the later pages, but the words stayed sharp. December 12th. Rowan builds with integrity. Grant builds for applause. One will last, the other will crumble when the lights go out. The sound of the clock ticking filled the silence between sentences. As I read, the entries began to shift from fatherly pride to something else. Worry. March 4th. If they fight after I'm gone, the company will rot from the inside. Rowan won't speak up. He never does, but I trust him more than anyone. Then came the line that stopped me cold. I've revised the trust. Rowan will oversee the assets until Grant learns humility, or loses it all. The papers are with Sloane. For a second, the room seemed to shrink. The faint hum of the clock, the smell of dust, it all blurred together. He had changed the will. He knew this fight was coming, and Grant had no idea. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the notebook in my hands. My pulse slowed, but my thoughts didn't. Everything that had happened tonight, the speeches, the photos, the whispers, it was all a distraction. Grant had wanted me humiliated so no one would ever question his version of Winston's legacy. But the old man had left me something stronger than money. He'd left me truth. My eyes fell on one of the final entries, the handwriting barely legible. If you're reading this, son, it means I'm gone. Don't let noise win. Build quietly. Let them underestimate you. It'll make the reveal cleaner. I closed the notebook, holding it like something sacred. My reflection caught in the glass of Winston's framed photo on the wall. For the first time in months, I saw not the outsider, but the heir Winston intended. Guess you knew this would happen, I murmured. You always did. I slipped the notebook inside my coat, checking once more that the drawer latch reset cleanly. The study returned to stillness, like nothing had been disturbed. Outside, the sky was just starting to pale, dawn creeping up behind the trees. I locked the door, slid the key back into my pocket, and walked down the hall toward the front entrance. The house looked different in that faint morning light, less like a monument, more like a stage that had already seen the final act. By the time I stepped outside, I'd stopped feeling sad. The grief had shifted, hardened into something clearer. I wasn't just mourning anymore. I was preparing for war. By the time the sun rose, the house behind me was already fading into the mist. I drove straight to the office. I didn't even stop for coffee. My mind was sharp, too sharp, the kind of clarity that only comes after something inside you breaks cleanly in two. The city was waking up as I pulled into the lot. Construction trucks rumbling down the road, a jogger cutting across the street with her dog. Life moved forward, like it didn't care that someone's world had shifted overnight. When I stepped into the office, the morning light cut through the tall glass windows, scattering across the dust in the air. It looked almost peaceful, like floating ash after a quiet fire. I turned on the desk lamp and spread out the blueprints I'd left the night before. There was something grounding about it. The geometry, the lines, the order. Buildings made sense. People didn't. Mabel walked in a few minutes later with a thermos of coffee and a look that said she already knew trouble was coming. "They're on their way," she said softly. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "Grant, and that lawyer of his, the one with the perfect smile." I nodded. "Leo Hartman." She hesitated. "Do you want me to stay?" "Yes," I said. "Just keep your distance, but stay." The elevator chimed before she could respond. I didn't even have to turn around. I could feel Grant's energy fill the room before the doors fully opened. He was talking too loud, laughing at something Leo had said. Their kind of laughter didn't come from humor. It came from power. "Morning, brother." Grant's voice rang out like we were in a sitcom. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," I said. "Did you?" "Like a baby," he said, grinning. "Guess some of us handle guilt better than others." Leo stepped forward, a polished man in an expensive gray suit, cufflinks gleaming. He carried a leather folder, the same shade as the one Grant had slammed on my desk 2 days ago. "Mr. Hensley," he said smoothly, offering a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Hope you don't mind the intrusion. We just want to clear up a small misunderstanding before this turns messy." "Messy?" I repeated. "That's your word for it." He chuckled. "Well, misunderstandings often become expensive if left alone." He laid the documents neatly on my desk and slid them across, just far enough to touch my hand. "Same paperwork as before, though we've updated a few clauses to make things easier for everyone." I didn't touch them. "Easier for who?" "For both parties," Leo said. "Grant here is being incredibly generous." I leaned back, folding my arms. "Generous?" Grant smirked. "Look, Rowan, let's make this painless, yeah? Just sign and walk away. I'll even make sure you keep your pension." "Pension?" I said, raising a brow. "You're talking like I worked for you." He shrugged. "You kind of did." Mabel stood frozen near the filing cabinets, her face pale. Leo tapped one page with his pen. "This clause simply confirms your release from any future claim on the Hensley Trust. Standard stuff. Sign, and we can all move on." I finally picked up the papers and scanned them. The formatting looked right, but the details were wrong. The trust name had been altered. My signature from the original contract had been copied. Sloppy. Arrogant. Winston's voice came back to me, quiet and steady. "They'll use your silence as proof of weakness." Grant was leaning back in the chair opposite mine, arms folded, one leg crossed over the other. He looked relaxed, too relaxed. "You really think money can rewrite blood?" I asked. He laughed, that sharp, practiced laugh that used to make rooms bend toward him. "You don't have blood, Rowan. You've got paperwork that says you belong. That's not the same." I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch until even Leo looked uncomfortable. Then I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out a single document, and laid it flat in front of them. Grant leaned forward. "What's that?" "Something new," I said. "A request for a formal inheritance audit." Leo's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "It's already notarized," I said evenly. "Filed under Section 23B of the Texas Probate Code. That means every asset, every transfer, every amendment since Winston's passing gets reviewed." Publicly. Grant's grin wavered. You wouldn't. I would, I said, cutting him off. I signed my name at the bottom of the audit request, my pen gliding smoothly across the page. Then I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out the linen handkerchief, Winston's, to wipe the ink from my fingertips. Grant's eyes flicked to it, recognition flashing there. Tomorrow morning, I said quietly, folding the paper and sliding it toward Leo. 10 o'clock sharp, Weston and Pierce downtown. Bring every document you've got. Leo hesitated, then picked up the paper like it might burn him. Grant forced a laugh. You're bluffing. You wouldn't drag this into court. It'll ruin your reputation. I smiled. Then I guess I've got nothing left to lose. He stood abruptly, trying to hold on to his composure. You think this is over? I met his stare. No, Grant. I think it's just starting. The elevator doors closed behind them with a soft chime. The room fell quiet again, sunlight spilling across the desk like nothing had happened. Mabel exhaled slowly. You really filed that? Every line, I said. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. About time. As she left, I unfolded the handkerchief once more, staring at the stitched letter R. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about setting the record straight. That night, long after the office lights had gone out, I opened my inbox. A new email sat at the top. Sent from an old address, time-stamped 2 weeks after Winston's death. The subject line read, For your eyes only. The apartment was quiet when I got home. Too quiet. I dropped my keys on the counter, shrugged off my blazer, and stood in the middle of the living room, staring into nothing. It had been a long day. The kind of day that starts with a legal ambush and ends with the ghost of your father figure reaching back from the grave. I loosened my tie, sat at my desk, and powered on the laptop. There it was, glowing faintly in my inbox. From Winston Hensley. Subject for your eyes only. The timestamp read 3 days before he died. My fingers hovered over the mouse. I clicked. There was no preamble, no sentimentality. Just one line. Rowan, if Grant's greed reaches you, know that I never left you unprotected. Look beneath the cedar box. W. I froze. The cedar box. I pushed back from the desk and walked quickly to the far shelf where Winston's old toolbox sat. He'd given it to me years ago, not in some grand gesture, just a quiet passing of hands one afternoon after we'd finished framing a model together. It smelled like his study, cedar, dust, and old ink. I lifted it down carefully and ran my fingers along the base. A faint line. My heart kicked harder. I flipped it over, and with a bit of pressure at the center of the bottom panel, a section popped loose. Inside was a small USB drive. No label. Just plain black plastic. I slipped it into the port on my laptop. It buzzed to life. There were folders, dozens of them, scanned PDFs, typed letters, handwritten notes, financial spreadsheets, legal memos, each one tied to the Hensley Trust, each one with my name. I clicked the folder labeled Final Revision. Inside, a signed and witnessed amendment, Winston's signature, 2 legal witnesses, and a notarized date. The trust had been changed, quietly, but fully. My name wasn't a footnote. I was co-heir, with protections built in so Grant couldn't touch my half without triggering legal repercussions. My stomach tightened, not in fear, but in some strange mix of relief and grief. Then I saw it. A file named simply Video WMP4. I clicked. The screen flickered, and there he was. Winston, thinner than I remembered, paler. But his eyes were the same, sharp, calm, never begging for attention, but commanding it anyway. He was sitting at his desk, the study lamp casting soft yellow light over his shoulders. "If you're watching this," he began, "then I'm gone. And I'd wager Grant's lost his damn mind." A faint smile touched his lips. "You've always been the quiet one. But don't confuse that with being powerless. You've built your life the right way, with discipline, patience, respect. You earned this family's name more than anyone born into it, including me." He paused, looked down, then back at the camera. "I made mistakes, Rowan. I should have said more while I was alive. Should have spoken louder when you were being pushed to the edges. But I thought, if I built something strong enough, it'd outlast all the noise." He reached for something off-screen, then held up a folded sheet of paper. "I revised the trust. It's legal, it's enforceable, and it's yours. I just needed time to finalize things before time ran out. If Grant's pressing you, don't fold. Not this time. You don't owe him your silence." He let out a slow breath. "Don't let them tear down what you've built." The screen went dark. I sat there, the silence pressing in. Not the kind of silence that felt hollow. This was full, heavy. I hadn't realized I was crying until I tasted salt on my lip. Not from pain, not even from sorrow. From something I hadn't felt in a long time, being seen. For so long, I had moved through the family like a tolerated shadow, polite nods, dismissive glances. They always made sure I felt like an addition, not a part. And now, in death, Winston had spoken louder than any of them ever had in life. I opened a new email and typed in one address, Will Pritchard, my old college roommate, and now a contracts attorney who owed me more than a few favors. Attached the PDF of the trust, one line in the body. "I'll need you tomorrow morning." Sent. A buzz pulled me back. Text from Mabel. "You okay?" I stared at the screen a second, then typed back, "Better than I've been in years." I shut the laptop gently, stood, and walked to the window. The skyline of Austin flickered, buildings full of people who'd never know the battle being waged in one family's name. I let the quiet settle around me, the cedar scent still lingering faintly in the air from the opened box. I whispered to the glass, more to Winston than anyone, "Let's see how deep you buried the truth, Grant." Then I turned away and headed to bed, knowing sleep would be light, and the morning heavy. By the time the sun pushed its way through the blinds in my apartment, I was already dressed. Gray suit, blue shirt. The same linen handkerchief folded and tucked into my inner pocket. Winston's, passed down years ago without a word. I left the apartment early, giving myself enough time to walk 2 extra blocks before looping back toward the Weston and Pierce building. I didn't want to just arrive. I wanted to own my steps, each one measured and grounded. At 9:42 a.m., I stepped into the elevator. Alone. My reflection stared back at me in the steel doors, not nervous, not rattled. Just ready. The 24th floor greeted me with thick carpets, silent hallways, and glass walls so clean they nearly disappeared. Rachel was already inside the conference room when I entered. Her laptop open, hair tied back, posture like a chess grandmaster waiting for the first move. She glanced up and smiled faintly. "You bring the storm?" I placed the cedar-scented USB drive on the table, followed by the leather notebook. The eye of it. She nodded, then went back to typing. Nothing more needed saying. At exactly 10:01 a.m., the elevator dinged. Grant strutted in like a man who believed the room owed him gravity. His suit screamed old money. His grin screamed middle school bully in a grown man's shell. Trailing behind him was Leo Hartman, The lawyer with the kind of polished charm you expect from someone who makes their living reshaping the truth. 2 younger associates followed, briefcases in hand, notepads ready. Grant didn't sit right away. He looked around the room like he was scouting real estate. "I hope you brought your checkbook, little brother," he said with that same smirk he wore at the memorial. "This is going to be short and expensive." Rachel closed her laptop with a click. "Actually, Mr. Hensley, this meeting is to review financial inconsistencies tied to the Hensley Trust, particularly after your grandfather's passing. This isn't a negotiation." Leo's smile twitched. "With all due respect," Rachel cut in smoothly, "respect will depend on what you're about to see." She connected her device to the wall display. With a few taps, Winston's signed trust amendment filled the screen. The room chilled. "This is dated 6 months after the will you've been referencing," she said calmly. "It clearly outlines a co-heir structure. It's signed, notarized, and witnessed." Leo leaned forward. That can't be official." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean in. I simply slid the USB toward him. "It's all there," I said. "Every revision, including emails between Winston and the estate accountant. Correspondence confirming he was setting up protections in the event of manipulation. Protections you triggered." Grant's smirk twitched. "You think this little stunt means anything? A few files and old words?" Rachel didn't flinch. "It means enough for us to request a full forensic audit, and we've already begun filing that request as of this morning." Leo blinked, clearly off balance. "You can't just—" "We already did," Rachel said, pulling out a printed confirmation slip. Grant's face tightened, and for the first time, I saw it. Fear. Not full-blown panic, but the kind that starts as a question in the gut and spreads to the face. "You said yesterday I wasn't real blood," I said, folding my hands calmly on the table. "Maybe not, but I'm real enough to have helped build every single square foot of what this family name sits on, brick by brick, deal by deal." His eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." I stood, pulled the linen handkerchief from my coat pocket, and placed it gently on the table. Flat. "Winston used to do that at the end of every meeting," I said, "whenever something was settled, when the truth had been spoken." No one said a word. Even the air conditioner's low hum seemed to hold its breath. I turned to Rachel and gave a single nod. Then I walked out without another glance back. As I stepped into the lobby, Mabel stood quietly near the wall. She didn't ask anything, just offered me a paper cup of coffee and a faint smile. The kind only people who've worked in silence their whole lives understand. I took the cup, stepped outside into the fall sunlight, and let the warmth hit my skin. This wasn't the end. But it was the first real crack in Grant's armor, and cracks let light in. But sometimes they also let the world see the rot beneath. By evening, downtown Austin was buzzing with noise. Reporters huddled outside the glass entrance of Bardot's, a high-end restaurant where Grant had decided to stage his latest performance, a family dinner meant to calm the storm now circling the Hensley name. It wasn't a dinner. It was damage control with good wine. I pulled up to the curb just as a photographer's flash went off. Someone called my name. I didn't stop for pictures. The moment I stepped through those glass doors, the temperature dropped. Conversations dimmed. Every face turned, calculating. Evelyn was the first to greet me. She looked tired, her pearls tight around her neck, her eyes flickering with that same old plea. "For once, Rowan," she whispered as she leaned in, "please don't make a scene." I didn't come to make one, I said quietly. I came to finish one. Grant stood near the center of the room, surrounded by half the board of Hensley Holdings and a few reporters pretending to be family friends. He was laughing too loudly, shaking hands like a man who still believed charm could rewrite truth. "Ah, here he is," he boomed, clapping me on the shoulder as I approached. "The man of the hour. My brother. Everyone. Brother." The word rolled off his tongue like a weapon wrapped in silk. I didn't respond. I just took my seat across from him. Rachel sat beside me, expression unreadable, her tablet closed but ready. Mabel was farther down the table, pretending to check her phone but watching everything. Dinner began in uneasy silence, the kind that stretches thin but doesn't break. The clinking of cutlery was the only sound for minutes. Grant eventually raised his glass, his smile wide enough for the cameras. "Let's remember who we are," he said, "a family built on legacy, on reputation, on trust." "Legacy built on whose back exactly?" I asked, my tone even. The air shifted. Someone dropped a fork. Grant lowered his glass slightly, his grin stiffening. "You want to do this here?" I didn't blink. "You already did, the day you erased me from grandfather's story." Evelyn's voice broke through, sharp but trembling. "Enough. This isn't the place." Grant cut her off with a glare. "You think you deserve a place at this table?" He hissed at me, voice dropping low. "You were a project, Rowan. A charity case. Don't mistake blood for pity." I leaned back. "You're right," I said. "Blood doesn't mean much if it runs cold." He slammed his glass down hard enough to rattle the plates. "You're not family." Before I could answer, a phone buzzed at the end of the table, then another. Murmurs began to ripple. Faces turned toward the glow of their screens. I didn't need to look. I knew. Rachel leaned in, whispering, "They leaked it. Someone posted the audit photo." The room erupted in whispers. A headline was already flashing across social media feeds. "Hensley Trust under investigation." Grant's mask shattered. "You did this," he spat. "You leaked it." I stared at him. "No, Grant, you did. The moment you tried to bury the truth." He stood up, his voice rising. "You were never part of this family. You were a mistake." For a second, no one breathed. Even Evelyn froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. I stood too, quietly, deliberately. "A mistake that your father trusted more than you." The words landed like a stone through glass. Grant's face flushed red. He reached for the edge of the table, knocking over a glass of wine, scattering napkins. My handkerchief, folded beside my plate, slipped off the table and fell at his feet. He kicked it aside without even noticing. I bent down, picked it up, and brushed it clean. Winston's embroidered R glimmered faintly under the soft restaurant light. I looked back at Grant one last time. "You can keep pretending, Grant, but the truth doesn't take sides. It just waits." Then I walked out. The cold Texas night hit like a baptism. Flashbulbs popped again, but this time I didn't flinch. Reporters shouted questions. I kept walking. For the first time, I didn't feel like the shadow of a family. I felt like my own name. The cameras followed me all the way to the car. The air crisp with the kind of silence that comes after a storm's first thunder. When I finally closed the door, my phone buzzed once. "Unknown number," I answered. Her voice was steady, but the words hit like a hammer. "I think I know what your brother did to your grandfather's will." There was a long silence on the line, the kind that stretches thin enough for the truth to slip through. "Who is this?" I asked. My name's Clara Myers, she said softly. I was Mr. Hensley's nurse during his last weeks. We need to talk. In person. The line went dead. By sunrise, I was already on Highway 35, heading south toward San Antonio. The sky was overcast, heavy with the kind of gray that made the road seem endless. I didn't play music. Didn't need to. The hum of the tires and the rhythm of my thoughts were enough. Clara had sent the address by text. A hospice care facility on the edge of the city, quiet and sterile, surrounded by trimmed hedges and the faint scent of antiseptic. Inside, everything smelled like disinfectant and resignation. The receptionist led me down a corridor to a small office at the back. Clara was waiting there, mid-50s, short blonde hair, eyes that had seen too much and remembered everything. When she stood, her hands trembled slightly. "Mr. Hensley," she began. "Rowan," I corrected gently. She nodded. "Rowan. I almost didn't make this call. But I kept something. Something your brother didn't know about." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder wrapped in a folded tissue. "I was there that night," she said, voice low, "when your brother came after visiting hours." My pulse quickened. "He came alone?" She nodded. "He told security he was family, that he just wanted to say goodbye. But the things I heard..." She looked down. "I couldn't forget them. So I recorded it." She slid the recorder across the desk. "You should hear it for yourself." I pressed play. The static crackled first, then Winston's voice, faint, labored, but steady. "I said the new will goes to both of you equally." Then came Grant's voice, cold, impatient, a familiar sharpness I knew too well. "You're not thinking straight, Granddad. You want your name protected, not tied to an outsider." Winston coughed. "Rowan's earned it." A chair scraped against the floor. Grant again, lower this time. "You won't even remember this anyway." Then a scuffle, a gasp, the faint sound of something being ripped. My stomach turned. Clara stopped the recording. Her voice broke. "He came out of that room a few minutes later. Said your grandfather was resting. I didn't question him. But the next morning, Mr. Hensley's papers were gone. The lawyer's copy arrived days later, a new version." She looked up, tears brimming. "I should have said something then. I was scared. But when I saw the news about the investigation..." She swallowed hard. "I couldn't keep it anymore." I sat there, staring at the small recorder like it was a living thing. My hands trembled once, then stilled. "You did the right thing now," I said quietly. She exhaled, almost in relief. "He didn't deserve what your brother did to his name. Winston was proud of you, you know. He said you built what he only dreamed of." For the first time that day, I had to look away. I took out my phone and called Rachel. She answered on the second ring. "Tell me you've got something," she said. I pressed the recorder to the receiver. When the voices played, she didn't interrupt once. When it ended, she exhaled sharply. "That's felony-level coercion, Rowan. The courts will eat this alive. Do not hand that over to anyone but me. I'll drive straight to Austin tonight." "Good," she said. "This changes everything." When the call ended, I looked back at Clara. "You've done more than you know. Thank you." She smiled faintly. "He trusted you. Maybe he knew you'd find your way back to the truth." Outside, the sky had darkened and rain was beginning to fall. The kind that doesn't pour, just lingers, soft and steady. I stood under the small overhang at the hospice entrance for a long moment before walking to the car. Inside, I placed the recorder on the passenger seat beside Winston's leather notebook and the folded handkerchief. 3 small things: one man's legacy, another's betrayal, and my proof of both. As the rain tapped against the windshield, I saw my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked older, sharper, not harder, just more certain. "You finally spoke, old man," I murmured. "And you did it your way." I turned the key, the engine came to life, and the road stretched ahead, wet and silver under the storm. Tomorrow, there would be no silence left to hide behind. And tomorrow came, and I felt it the second my feet hit the floor. The stillness of a day that would not flinch. No tremor in my hands, no racing thoughts, just breath, purpose. I buttoned my shirt slowly, pressing the collar flat with my palm. Slipped the folded handkerchief, Winston's, into my breast pocket. That quiet cedar scent greeted me like an old friend. By 8:30, I was already standing outside the Travis County Courthouse, the morning sun sharp and indifferent. Reporters lined the steps like vultures in business casual, camera shutters clicking in unison. But I kept walking, head high, jaw steady. Mabel was already inside, waiting in the gallery. She gave me a faint nod as I passed. No smile, just strength. The courtroom was bright, sterile, air conditioning humming, the kind that dries your mouth but doesn't cool your nerves. Grant was already seated, his suit crisp but wrinkled at the sleeves. He looked older than he had just a week ago. The kind of age that doesn't come from years, but from secrets. Rachel leaned toward me, voice barely above a whisper. "Everything's lined up. Stay still. Let the truth do the work." When Judge Murphy entered, the room straightened like soldiers. He was a man who'd heard every kind of lie and still believed in order. His eyes swept the courtroom with the kind of patience that warned, "Don't waste my time." Docket number 227 or B, Hensley Estate ver Grant Hensley, the clerk called. Rachel rose. "Your Honor, we present new and critical evidence, a recorded conversation between the deceased, Winston Hensley, and the defendant, Grant Hensley. We ask that it be admitted under Rule 803, exception for statements made by a declarant now unavailable." The judge gave a nod. "Play it." The courtroom stilled. Rachel pressed a key on her laptop. The speakers crackled. Winston's voice came first, fragile but certain. "I said the new trust divides equally." Then Grant, sharper. "You're not thinking straight, old man. You want your name protected, not tied to an outsider." A pause, then Winston again. "No, Grant, you will." The room didn't move. Even the pens stopped clicking. Grant's lawyer stood suddenly. "Objection!" "Sit down," Judge Murphy cut in. "I want to hear this." Then Clara was called to the stand. Her hands trembled slightly as she swore in, but when she spoke, her voice held. "I was Winston's nurse during his last weeks. That night, Grant came after hours. I heard that conversation through the door, and later, I saw him leave with documents from Winston's bedside drawer." Rachel placed the USB and notebook carefully on the table before the judge. Her words were clean, surgical. "These are copies of the revised trust, notarized, time-stamped, with correspondence between Winston and the estate accountant. They were hidden. Removed after Winston's incapacitation." Silence. Judge Murphy looked down at the exhibits for a long moment before leaning back. "Mr. Rowan Hensley's claim is substantiated. The revised trust is valid and will be honored. Mr. Grant Hensley, your actions, including destruction and concealment of legal documents, will be referred to the district attorney's office for further review." There was no gavel slam, Just the sound of a verdict echoing through the floor. Grant didn't speak, didn't even look at me. His jaw trembled. Whether from rage or shame, I couldn't tell. Probably both. I stood slowly. No grin, no gloat. I just turned toward Mabel. She mouthed 2 words. It's over. Outside, the cameras found me again. One voice cut through the noise. Mr. Hensley, anything you want to say to your brother? I paused, looked up at the wide Texas sky, so blue it hurt. I already did, I said quietly. Yesterday. They didn't need more than that. I walked past the shouting, past the flashing bulbs, down the courthouse steps with the sun on my face. My hand found my chest, the handkerchief still tucked where it belonged. Cedar. Resolve. A man's memory folded against my heartbeat. I didn't get revenge. I didn't need to. I got the truth. I got peace. And as I crossed the street toward nothing in particular, I whispered to no one. Some inheritances aren't money. They're freedom.